Night, the Mediterranean roars like a living monster. Spotlights sweep across the black water. Sirens scream from the decks of 5 Italian warships. Sailors run, slipping across wet steel, shouting orders that vanish beneath the thundering of distant engines, and then a single coded message comes through. A message that no one should have been able to read. A message that reveals everything. Because one girl, barely 20 years old, had done the impossible. Her crazy idea mocked, dismissed, laughed at by senior. Officers had broken a secret Enigma pattern no one was supposed to touch, and just minutes after her breakthrough, the ocean erupted 5. Enemy warships were about to vanish under the waves. But how did one girl pull off the trick the world's smartest cryptanalysts couldn't? Hold on, because her story is more unbelievable than the sinking that followed. By the middle of 1941, the Mediterranean had become one of the most dangerous places on Earth. Entire Allied convoys vanished overnight, swallowed by Italian cruisers, submarines, and Luftwaffe attacks that always seemed to know exactly where to strike. Every ship that sailed toward Malta or Alexandria carried not only supplies, fuel, and ammunition, but the lives of thousands of men depending on those shipments. And yet, day after day, mission after mission, the Admiralty found itself blind. The Axis fleet moved like a ghost armada, appearing suddenly, disappearing just as fast, striking from angles no one anticipated. Why? Because behind this deadly efficiency was a machine the British feared more than torpedoes Enigma. The unbreakable code system that guarded every Italian naval order. In a quiet British intercept station far from the roar of battle, Evelyn Carter, a young civilian mathematician, sat among rows of radio receivers, decoding machines, and stacks of intercepted messages that the experts said would take months, sometimes years to understand. She was not an officer. She had no medals, no battlefield experience. She was just a backup analyst with a sharp mind and a reputation for seeing patterns others missed. But what she saw emerging in the Italian traffic was terrifying. The faint outline of a coordinated naval operation, larger and more dangerous than anything the British had faced in months. If the Allies misread this, they failed to anticipate the Axis move on, entire British convoy could be wiped out, cutting off the last lifeline to Malta and crippling the North African front. The outcome of the Mediterranean campaign could shift overnight. Yet Evelyn faced another invisible enemy: doubt. The senior analysts dismissed her observations as anomalies, statistical noise, or rookie imagination. Enigma, they insisted, was too complex to break from accidental pattern recognition. But Evelyn knew better. She could feel the stakes tightening like a noose around the Allied war effort. If she was wrong, she would waste precious military resources. But if she was right, if the Italian fleet was planning a new strike, then thousands of sailors' lives hung on whether the Admiralty listened to a girl who wasn't supposed to be leading anything at all. The Mediterranean, the supply routes, the future of Malta, even the tempo of the North African campaign, all of it depended on deciphering a code the world believed unbreakable. And Evelyn Carter was seconds away from challenging that belief. The moment that launches everything is quiet at first, a single flicker on the cathode tube, the rhythmic patter of Morse that most technicians ignore. But for Evelyn, the pattern is wrong, not a mistake in the letters, but in the heartbeat of the message. The room smells of oil and cigarette smoke. The low hum of generators underlines a late afternoon lull that usually feels safe. Then, at 14:17, the Italian transmitter starts a burst of traffic that should be routine, short-clipped, high-priority naval signals. The intercept operator clocks it and passes it to Evelyn as he has 100 other messages that week. She glances and freezes. The spacing between repeat groups, the tiny fractions of time operators never record, has a rhythm. It's like hearing the offbeat in a familiar song that suddenly becomes a clue. Evelyn pulls the tape, rewinds, plays again. This time, she marks the milliseconds, frames the groups on paper, draws connecting lines in the margins. These aren't random timing slips. They're deliberate offsets layered over normal Enigma traffic. A shadow channel. piggybacked on the main encryption to speed tactical naval coordination without the heaviness of full ENIGMA encoding. In military parlance, minor operational convenience, but to anyone listening, it's a dangerous leak. She runs the numbers rapidly. Local timestamps, known port schedules, expected convoy routes. The offsets map onto a narrow maritime corridor between an Italian supply base and the open route toward North Africa. She keys the pattern into her notebook, and with a hand that trembles but does not slow, extrapolates a movement timetable, 5 large holes departing at dusk, an escort screen, and a secondary column that will parachute in support. The kind of grouping that, if intercepted and attacked in formation, could mean a decisive, crippling blow. Evelyn knows the rules. No unilateral calls, no unsanctioned strike orders. She runs upstairs, her shoes slapping the concrete steps, corners of her hair damp with sweat. The operations officer is skeptical. ENIGMA is supposed to cover everything. "You're seeing noise," he says. But her voice is steady. It's not noise. It's a skeleton under the message. She has 40 minutes before dusk, maybe less if the Italians speed up tempo. The officer finally relents and forwards a focused brief to the fleet command, not yet a full alert. Only a flagged anomaly with her annotated timeline. Across the channel, the first domino falls, a harried signal from a reconnaissance flight reporting odd cruiser lights and unusual formation. It fits her overlay. The admiral at command centers the watch case board, eyes burning from sleepless weeks. He convenes a rapid response call with the airstrike wing and picks the nearest torpedo squadrons. Orders go out: intercept, shadow, strike if contact confirmed. Evelyn returns to her desk, not to relax but to monitor. The next intercept comes through precisely on her predicted cadence. The Italians are moving faster than their own codes expect, and their fallback chatter is the very shadow she tracked. For the first time, a guarded, probable belief forms in the room. A hidden channel inside ENIGMA has been found, and it maps a real, imminent movement. The trigger has become certainty, and the clock is now a hammer. The moment her decoded fragment reached the operations room, the night transformed from tense to electric-like, a wire pulled so tight it could snap with the smallest spark. Even the dim red battle station lights seemed to flicker with urgency, casting long, sharp shadows across the chart table where officers leaned in, jaws locked, breaths shallow. Outside, the sea was Commerly Commit's black surface, reflecting the moon like a polished blade. But inside the war room, the calm shattered. Every whisper carried weight. Every second stretched thin. Because everyone knew one thing: if her decoded message was real, 5 Italian warships were moving right now, straight into the kill zone. If she was wrong, hundreds of Allied sailors could die in the dark, and she wasn't even supposed to be here. Not in the decoding room. Not in the planning room. Not in the war, but here she was. A 17-year-old girl with headphones still warm from intercepting the signal. Her fingers still trembling from the crazy trick. She used to break a cipher her commanders said was unbreakable. No one trusted her. No one believed her. Except the clock. And it was running. The commanding officer slammed his palm onto the table. "Verify it again," he barked. 3 cryptographers rushed forward. Pages flipped. Machines whirred. Radios crackled. Sweat glistened on foreheads. But the girl stood completely stillies, fixed on the map because she knew something the others didn't. Her trick didn't guess the code. It exploited a flaw no one else had ever seen. And she was certain. Dead certain. A sudden burst of static tore through the room, another intercept. A second confirmation. A coded phrase. Identical structure. Her decoding matched perfectly. Silence slammed down like a hammer. Then sound the alarm. Klaxons erupted. Lights snapped from red to white. Boots pounded across steel floors. Sailors sprinted to stations, pushing past her as if she were invisible, but she wasn't. Because one officer stopped. The one who doubted her most. He leaned close, his voice low and deadly serious. "If you're wrong, we'll lose them all." She didn't blink. Then I can't be wrong. She wasn't. Because when the fleet adjusted course just a few degrees, just a few minutes, the night shifted. Radar screens lit up. Sonar pings returned unexpected echoes, all in the direction her decoded coordinates pointed. Then came the moment no one could have prepared for. A lookout shouted from the deck, "Contact!" Multiple silhouettes bearing 190. Through the mist, through the moonlight, 5 shapes grew larger. Steel towers. Warship bows slicing through water like knives. Smokestacks, turrets, searchlights. The Italian fleet, exactly where she said they'd be. The officers' faces drained of color. The girl's heart hammered so hard it felt like it echoed through the entire deck. The ships were closer than expected. Much closer. They had minutes. Maybe less. Orders piled up like dominoes. Load torpedoes. Prepare depth charges. Battle stations, all hands. Signal destroyers flank speed. But amid the chaos, the girl noticed something everyone else missed. The Italian ships weren't in attack formation. They were in transit, vulnerable, exposed, low alert. This wasn't just an end opportunity, it was a perfect trap. Her voice cut through the bedlam. They're not expecting a fight. Hit them in the first strike, they won't recover. Every officer froze. The commander turned toward her, eyes narrowed. Then slowly he nodded and spoke the words that would echo in her memory forever. "All right, we attack." On her signal, for a heartbeat she couldn't breathe. Her signal? Her? A teenager. Guiding a strike that could break the enemy fleet? The weight crushed her. But the moment passed. Her hands steadied. Her voice returned. "Fire when I say." Below deck, sailors clung to the torpedo tubes. Above deck, artillery crews braced themselves. Every heartbeat, every creak of the ship, every breath the world narrowed into a single point. She waited. Waited. Watching their course. Watching their angle. Watching the moment the Italian ships crossed into the perfect zone, and then she inhaled sharply. Now. Torpedoes screamed into the black water, the night erupted, and the world changed. The torpedoes vanished beneath the surface, slicing through the black water with ghost-like silence. No flash, no roar, no trace. Only the girl and the men at their stations heard the faint, metallic clink, clink, clink of the launch clamps releasing. Those tiny sounds were the only evidence that the attack had begun, or that it might already be a disaster, because torpedoes don't explode immediately. You don't see them. You don't hear them. You just wait. And hope 20 seconds, 30, 40, the Italian ships kept moving, steady, unafraid, completely. Unaware that death was swimming straight toward them, but every passing second stretched the girl's nerves tighter and tighter, like a violin string pulled to breaking. She could feel the crew's eyes shifting toward her, some wide with fear, some with doubt. What if her coordinates were off by a few meters? What if the enemy turned slightly? What if her trick didn't break ENIGMA at all? The commander leaned close, voice low and razor-edged. "Where's the impact?" The girl's mouth went dry. She stared out over the ink-black waves. Her heartbeat slammed in her ears like distant gunfire, and then boom. A single, bone-shaking blast shattered the night. The deck trembled. The water lit up with a violent orange flash like a volcano erupting underwater. Then a second blast. Then a third. The sea rippled with spreading rings of fire. One of the Italian destroyers lurched sideways, its hull ripped open. Water pouring in, its sirens howling like a dying beast. She whispered, barely audible. Direct hits. 3 of them. But the victory lasted only seconds, because the entire Italian fleet woke up at once. Searchlights snapped on, white spears tearing through darkness, sweeping across the water. Alarms screamed from ship to ship. Deck guns twisted, scanning for shadows. They had spotted the attack, but not the attackers. And then the girl heard it, a sound that froze her blood. The Italian flagship's command trumpet, a deep, echoing horn. Full speed, prepare counterattack. The enemy began turning, swinging their guns right toward her fleet. The commander yelled, "Brace for return fire." A second officer shouted to her, "What do we do now?" "They'll find us any second." Her mind raced calculations, firing faster than fear. The Italians were searching in the wrong direction. They assumed the torpedoes came from the east. But the girl knew the currents here they always bent north, which meant the enemy would overshoot their aim. This was the tiny mistake she needed. She grabbed the radio operator's shoulder. Signal the fleet now. Turn 5 degrees starboard. Stay silent. Don T. Fire. Let them search the wrong quadrant. The operator hesitated. You're sure? Yes, she snapped. If we fire back, they'll find us. If we stay still, they'll lose us. Above them, an Italian spotlight swept closer. Closer, the beam moving like a hunting blade across the waves. 1 more degree. 1 more second, and they'd be caught. The commander clenched his jaw. His voice was barely a whisper. Hold. Steady. The spotlight washed across the water, missing them by 30 meters. Every man exhaled at once. The girl didn't because she saw something else, something far worse. The Italian cruisers weren't breaking formation. They were forming a wedge, a ramming wedge, a maneuver used only. When the enemy is cornered, they weren't searching. They were coming straight through the darkness, charging, blind, hoping to smash into the attackers by pure luck. A mad tactic, a desperate tactic, a lethal tactic. The destroyers screamed warnings. They're coming right at us. Collision course. Brace, brace. And through the night fog, she saw it. The sharp silhouette of a battleship bow. Cutting through the water, pointed directly at her ship, she grabbed the railing. Her stomach dropped. This wasn't an attack anymore. It was a race. A race the ship could not win, lest she did something insane. Something crazy. Her specialty. She spun toward the commander. We have to turn toward them. He stared at her in disbelief. Toward them. That's suicide. No, listen. If we turn away, they'll run us down. But if we cut across their angle, we slip through the gap before the others close in. The commander froze. The ship shook. The battleship roared closer. Her voice trembled. Stayed firm. It's the only move that works. Trust me. A long, terrifying silence. Then, helm hard to port. The ship groaned as it swung. The deck tilted. Men grabbed rails to keep from falling. The engine screamed as the ship carved a desperate turn across the battleship's path. The fog parted, and the battleship's hull towered over them like a collapsing skyscraper. For a moment, she thought they wouldn't make it, that her crazy plan would kill them all. But then the Italian ship surged past, so close she could read the painted letters on its stern, so close she could hear the yelling of panicked sailors on deck. So close the girl felt the hot blast of its engines wash over her face. The destroyer. Commander shouted, "We made IT!" We made it. But the girl didn't celebrate, because behind the battleship, she saw something terrifying. The other ships were still coming. Still hunting. Still charging blind, and the night was far from over. The sea had barely settled from the near collision when the girl realized the night was spiraling into something far more dangerous than a simple ambush. The Italian fleet, now fully alerted and enraged, began shifting into an attack pattern she had only ever seen in captured diagrams, an encirclement maneuver known as il cerchio. The circle. It was designed to trap smaller enemy vessels in a tightening ring, choke their escape routes, and crush them with coordinated gunfire. Even the most experienced British captains feared it. But tonight, Evelyn Carter, a civilian codebreaker who wasn't supposed to be anywhere near combat, found herself at the center of it. She scanned the dark horizon where the enemy ships moved like jagged black mountains, their silhouettes growing larger, their cannons rotating toward her fleet with slow, deliberate menace. The water vibrated with the thrum of their engines, and for a moment, she wondered if this was the final page of her story. She didn't panic. She calculated. Her eyes darted across the glowing map table, tracing the Italian formation like a live puzzle, 3 destroyers to the north, a cruiser blocking the east, and a battleship swinging wide toward the south. They weren't guessing anymore. They were executing a pattern only someone who had broken Enigma could fully understand. She realized with a cold shiver that the Italians were following the exact maneuver she had intercepted in their encoded naval traffic hours earlier. The very message she had deciphered had predicted this trap, and now she had seconds, maybe a minute to outthink. A fleet designed to overwhelm any surviving attackers. The commander rushed to her side, breath ragged from shouting orders. "They're closing the circle. We need a firing solution. Now." He slammed a fist against the table. "If we don't hit something, we don't make it to sunrise." But Evelyn wasn't looking at the main formation. She was staring at the smallest detail, a destroyer drifting just a few meters out of alignment. An error. A mistake. A gap. Not large, not obvious, but real. And in naval warfare, sometimes a life-or-death decision came down to a gap no wider than a fishing boat. She leaned over the map, voice tight. "Here, this ship. Look at its angle. It's lagging behind the formation. They don't see it, but if we torpedo this destroyer, its explosion will push the others to break formation. The circle collapses, and we cut straight through the opening before the battleship adjusts." The commander blinked at her. "That's a timing shot. We'd be firing blind." "And they'd never expect it," she replied softly. "Because it's insane." He stared at her, and suddenly smiled. "Good. Let's go insane." The ship dove into position, engines screaming like tortured metal as they accelerated into the narrowest arc. The Italian searchlights swung wildly now, carving gashes of white through the fog, getting closer with every second. One beam skimmed, their bow so close that Evelyn felt its heat on her skin. Then the first Italian salvo fired massive cannon blasts that tore the sky into pieces. Shells whistled overhead, exploding in enormous geysers around them. The deck rocked so violently that 2 men were thrown to their knees, but the girl didn't flinch. She locked her eyes on the drifting destroyer. "Steady," she whispered, gripping the railing until her knuckles turned white. "Steady," the torpedo officer shouted. "Range closing. 10 seconds to optimal shot." Yelled. "All ships brace for return fire." The Italian cruiser adjusted course, the battleship's guns rotated. The destroyers accelerated, everything was moving at once. And Evelyn Carter, the girl whose crazy trick had cracked Enigma hours earlier, lifted her voice above the chaos and shouted, "Fire!" The torpedoes launched with a violent jolt that shook the deck. For one horrific moment, nothing happened. Just the dark, just the sound of enemy guns. Just the tightening noose of the Italian circle. Then a blinding explosion erupted beneath the drifting destroyer. Tearing it open like a tin can, a pillar of fire shot skyward. A shockwave slammed into the neighboring ships, throwing their formation into confusion. Officers screamed orders from every Italian deck. Their lines broke. Their angles faltered. The circle collapsed. The opening she predicted, the impossible, tiny opening appeared. "That's our gap," the commander roared. All engines full. Go. The ship surged forward. Water foamed. Metal screamed. The night lit up with tracer fire as Italian gunners panicked and fired wildly in every direction. Shell exploded only meters away. A second slammed into the waves just off their port side. The third, by inches. Evelyn ducked, covering her head as splinters rained down, but they were through. They broke the Italian circle. They escaped the trap. She lifted her head, hair whipping in the wind, as another Italian cruiser caught fire in the distance from the chain reaction blast. The battlefield she had engineered was burning exactly as she predicted. But even as the crew cheered, she felt a chill creep through her spine, because one last Italian ship, the largest of them all, was turning, slowly, deliberately, a predator choosing its moment. The battleship that had missed them earlier was now swinging its massive guns into position, and this time it was aiming directly at them. The first light of dawn painted the Mediterranean with a pale, almost ghostly glow, but the devastation from the night's attack lingered like smoke over the water. Oil slicks shimmered across the waves, reflecting the twisted, blackened hulls of ships that had once been towering instruments of war. The sea, calm now, was deceptive. Beneath it lay the remnants of 5 mighty warships and thousands of lives forever altered. Rescue boats scuttled between wrecks, hauling survivors, their faces pale, eyes wide with shock. Some were screaming, some were silent. Some stared blankly at the horizon, unable to comprehend the sudden, violent collapse of everything they had believed unshakable. Evelyn Carter stood on deck, hair matted with sweat, the taste of salt and smoke in her mouth, her hands trembling from adrenaline and exhaustion. Around her, officers shouted and scribbled frantic reports, but she felt neither triumph nor relief, only the cold, steady pulse of awareness. She had done something impossible, something no one else could imagine, and yet the cost was real and heavy. Inside the operations room, the officers reviewed intercepted signals, maps, and telegraphs. The tactical brilliance of the night's attack slowly became clear. The Italian fleet had been disoriented. The circle formation broken, the timing of their maneuvers exploited perfectly. Allied convoys were now safe. Malta would be resupplied, and North African campaigns gained a strategic reprieve. Yet the human cost weighed heavily in every calculation. 2,303 enemy sailors were lost, some trapped inside their burning ships, others swallowed by the waves in the chaos. Casualty reports arrived in staggered trickles, each number more surreal than the last, and each one silently etching the gravity of war into every mind present. Evelyn, normally precise and logical, felt the emotional sting for the first time, triumph and horror entwined. One girl's crazy trick had altered the course of a campaign, but the ocean had claimed its price. As officers wrote formal dispatches, Evelyn's contribution remained almost invisible. Her work, brilliant but unauthorized, was classified immediately. The higher command issued terse memos, vague commendations, and ensured that history would record the victory without exposing the method. Her name would not appear in dispatches. Her identity would be a footnote. The genius of cracking a new ENIGMA pattern, predicting enemy maneuvers, and orchestrating a strike of such precision gone behind locked doors, encrypted archives, and the unspoken code of secrecy. She walked among the survivors and crew, unseen, unrecognized, feeling both immense satisfaction and strange isolation. The world would remember the victory, but not the girl who made it possible. Even as calm returned to the Mediterranean, the shadows of what had almost happened lingered. Historians later discovered that Italian command had considered altering their code by a mere hour, the night, a change that would have rendered Evelyn's calculations useless. At a timing of her discovery, her insight, her courage, everything had to align perfectly, or the fleet would have survived, and the Allies would have suffered catastrophic losses. The stakes of that one night, the fragility of life, the razor's edge between genius and disaster, these were the hidden truths that history often hides. And in the quiet corners of a British listening station, her notebook remained untouched. For decades, filled with patterns, timings, and codes no one believed she could break. Pages marked with frantic calculations, sketches of fleet movements, and notes that seemed almost absurdly simple till the night revealed their deadly accuracy. A single improbable insight by one girl had shattered the illusion of enigmas. Invulnerability, reshaping naval strategy, saving lives, and leaving the world to wonder how much power resides in a mind that refuses to accept the impossible.